This bench is a duplicate for a restoration hardware bench that costs a lot of money, like over $1,000. And I thought, yeah, I still love the bench, I still want it, but maybe I can build it instead. And sure enough, I can, and I did. And so we're gonna take a look at that today. However, if you are more of like a visual type of person, you wanna see all the specific measurements, I will put that on my website, which I will link below. Also, keep in mind that with this bench, you can make it a little bit longer or a little bit shorter to fit your specific needs. So we have a shorter dining room table here, just given the space that we have. So I shortened the bench up a little bit. But if you have a longer table, maybe a 72-inch, you can definitely elongate it. All you do is have these top boards and the side supporting boards be just a little bit longer, and the side ones will stay exactly the same because the supports will still stay the same. So let's just get into it.
First up, here is your shopping list, all the individual pieces you'll get at the lumber yard, and then all the cuts that you will be making of those pieces. First things first, I took the 4x4 and cut it down into 4 pieces that were 14.5 inches in length. You'll also notice that I'm taking my time while I'm measuring this. I really abide by the philosophy of measure twice, cut once. I'm also using my first cut as a guide for my next cuts. That way I know they're all going to be the same length. You can use a stop block to do this as well, but I just try to make it as quick and simple as possible. Next up, I am cutting down those 2x8 boards. There are 2 of them in total to cut. I cut mine to 56 inches, but again, this is one of the pieces that if you want your board to be a little bit shorter or a little bit longer, this is one of the pieces, one of the lengths that you would adjust. Next up, I am cutting down the 2x4s. For my bench, I cut them down to 48.5 inches. But again, this is a piece that would be a little bit longer or a little bit shorter for your bench if you need to adjust. And then these next pieces are actually the smaller 2x4s that go on the sides of the benches. Those will be the same regardless of your width. This final cut is the center support piece. Here you can see I've made all of my cuts. Here are the measurements for all of the cuts, but again, I will also have this posted on my website as well. Next up is the fun part, assembly. And for that, I used my drill, a Kreg tool, and then also some Kreg wood drilling screws. Here you'll see me drill pocket holes into all of these boards that need to be nicely fit together. And I cannot say enough about this Kreg tool. It's super affordable, super useful, and it just gives a really nice clean look to all of my projects. As you can see here, I am drilling 4 pocket holes along the length of those 2x8 boards. Now that we're ready to assemble, I switched out my drill bits, got my Gorilla wood glue, my screws, and my large clamp. Pretty self-explanatory here. I am putting a good amount of wood glue on the board so that I can then sandwich it together next to the other 2x8, clamp it, and then drill them in place. I will admit that when screwing these boards together, I really wish I would have had my impact driver. The drill works okay, but an impact driver just makes the job that much smoother and easier. The drill did great for actually drilling the holes, but the impact driver does a much better job of getting the screws in place. Next up, it's time to assemble the legs and the side support 2x4s that hold them together. And what I found that worked out very well was using a smaller 2x4 scrap to actually bring the one that needed to be screwed into the 4x4s up to the correct depth, as you can see here. This is another part where I really wish I would have had my impact driver. Unfortunately, I loaned it out to a friend, so I just had to use my drill that I had on hand, but I can't tell you how much easier it would have been with an impact driver and how many less screws I would have stripped. Now that one side is done, I will create the exact same thing for the other side of the bench. Again, positioning the wood to the correct depth using a small scrap underneath and then drilling in place. At this point, I decided to do a quick dry fit just to make sure that all of the pieces fit together nicely, and they did. Next up, I needed to create pocket holes on each end of the longer 2x4s, so I did 2 on each side. Final assembly is ready to take shape. So at this point, I'm putting all the pieces together and will actually screw them in place with the Craig wood screws. First up, I got out my belt sander and sanded all of the rough areas of the bench down. I finished sanding with my orbital sander, and I used a high grit paper so that I knew I was going to get a smooth finish. My kids are going to be the ones that are using this bench the most, and I really wanted to make sure that there was no chance that they would get a sliver or a splinter. Finally, it's time to stain your piece. You can choose any color that matches your decor. I chose Early American by Minwax. After applying the stain, I let it dry for a few minutes before coming back in with a lint-free cloth to wipe everything down. After this step, I allowed the bench to dry overnight before coming back in and applying a polyacrylic top coat, also by Minwax.
I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you try this bench. And if you do, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have any questions, let me know as well. Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you next time. Later.